Welcome back, guys, to the 10-minute Bitcoin show. I got a secret for you guys. If you want to burn more calories, cook at a higher temperature. We're going to get you out of here before the next block. We've got some bombshells, guys. We've got some interesting news that I have no doubt in my mind is going to be making the rounds on X and Twitter for the next couple of weeks. We're going to get some mileage out of this stuff, guys. I guess essentially what happened was there were a couple of Epstein emails that were cherry-picked and leaked by the DNC. And then I think it was like just in the last 24 hours, the Republicans were like, okay, you're just going to release 3, we're going to release 20,000. So there was a huge Epstein email dump, and right away there was this one that got picked up by an independent news outlet called The Rage, which is just like a website as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. But they published an article called Emails Reveal Jeffrey Epstein Money Financed Bitcoin Core Development. Now that's a quite a headline, and it's not technically false, I would say. The interesting things about the emails is that, there's not a whole lot of smoking gun in the emails, right? Basically what happened was Epstein gave some money to this group called the DCI, the Digital Currency Initiative, which is a property of MIT. And if you know anything about MIT, there's a lot of research that gets done through that school, a lot of funding of things like cutting edge work and political lobbying and all these types of things. So what we know from these documents for sure is that Epstein gave some money to the DCI of MIT, and that DCI funded some Bitcoin Core developers. However, that isn't really the whole story because, oh wait, that's the wrong thing. I don't have this pulled up, but I had a list. It's somewhere in my things. I'll try to put it in the show notes. But there's a list of developers that have been paid by DCI over the years. This is public information. You can see exactly which Bitcoin Core developers have received funding from DCI if you're curious. I'll try to post that list in the show notes. But in and of itself, I think receiving funding from a group like DCI is not particularly implicitly evil, right? Like, it doesn't imply that there is shenanigans going on there. It's possible that there's a lot of good research and development work being done through like DCI funding recipients. And then it's also possible that there's shenanigans going on alongside there. My brief look through DCI, I'm not super familiar with the types of research that they've published and things like that. It seems like a mixed bag to me. There seemed to be some legitimate research there. There seemed to be a lot of shit coins there, a lot of blockchain crypto type stuff, and then a few pretty solid Bitcoin Core developers that have made a lot of contributions to Bitcoin over the years. But one of the things that the Epstein emails talks about is this power vacuum that got created after Brock Pierce became the director of the Bitcoin Foundation in like 2014 or whenever that was. And the Bitcoin Foundation kind of became really unpopular when that happened. So there was like kind of a funding power vacuum. And at the time, DCI started funding Gavin Andresen. Now, if you don't know who Gavin Andresen is, he was one of the earliest Bitcoin developers that we know of. He took over the role of lead maintainer from Satoshi, and that handoff of lead maintainer happened several months before Gavin announced on the Bitcoin Talk forums that he was going to go give a presentation to the intelligence communities about Bitcoin on April 27th, 2011. The day right before that, April 26th, 2011, is the last known correspondence that we had of Satoshi. His last known correspondence, like using his signature, like that we can validate with like keys and whatever identities that we know for a fact that he owned, was April 26th in an email correspondence with Gavin regarding his planned announcement to go to the intelligence communities about Bitcoin. So if you don't know what happened to Gavin after this, he was the lead maintainer of Bitcoin for a period of time. And then by about 2014, 2015, 2016, he had become disenfranchised with Bitcoin Core because he believed that they were not being allowed to scale the network on chain by increasing the block size. Now, we're not going to get too into the technicals of increasing the block size and why that's a dumb idea and why it's unsustainable and why you can't scale a decentralized blockchain to thousands, millions, billions of people by just linearly increasing the block size. But just know that that was attempted and failed. But Gavin was a big advocate of this. And he went on to work for Bitcoin XT. He went on to contribute to Bitcoin Classic. He went on to endorse Bitcoin Unlimited. All of these were alternative Bitcoin implementations that proposed hard forks to increase the block size. Bitcoin Classic wanted to increase the block size from 1 megabyte to 2. Bitcoin Unlimited, I think, wanted to increase it from 1 to 8. And I think Bitcoin XT also wanted to increase it from 1 to 8. But regardless of the actual numbers, they all had the same thing in common, that they all wanted hard forks to increase the block size. Eventually, Gavin went on to endorse Bitcoin Unlimited, aka what kind of eventually became the BCH Big Blocker client. Bitcoin Unlimited was sort of absorbed by Bitcoin ABC, I think is the way that I understand it. But all of this, like I said, this isn't really a smoking gun. But the reason that I bring this up is because in the Epstein emails that we got leaked, that were covered in this Rage article, Jeffrey Epstein mentions Gavin by name and says Gavin is clever when discussing with the, at the time, director of the Digital Currency Institute about their attempts to try to gain influence over funding in some of this open source money protocol initiative. So I thought that was really interesting. Here's the tweet where Gavin endorsed running Bitcoin Unlimited, which, remember, this was a hard fork block size increase. And then these were these last two emails that were conversations between Satoshi and Gavin. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, there was another report that was published by MIT back in 2020, a pretty detailed, thorough investigation of, their dealings with Jeffrey Epstein professionally, I guess. Pretty much a chronicling of all of the interactions that they had that were on record with Jeffrey Epstein. I don't think that these emails really revealed a whole lot of new information that we didn't have like before this was going on or whatever. But like I said, it did call out Gavin by name, and Gavin was involved in Bitcoin XT. Gavin was involved in Bitcoin Classic. Gavin did endorse Bitcoin Unlimited. Gavin did say that he believed that Craig Wright was Satoshi. These are all things like that we know pretty much ended up becoming pretty unpopular and failed. But if you had gone through all of this alternative implementation work and then ultimately leading up to Bitcoin Cash in 2017, would know that there was a lot of psyoping going on. And, to me, it's just interesting, right? It's like I said, this isn't necessarily a smoking gun. This doesn't necessarily prove anything. And in the case of like Bitcoin XT and Bitcoin Classic and Bitcoin Unlimited, they were never separate blockchains. What they were was separate implementations. And at various points in time, those implementations proposed hard forks that, if activated, if run by like a not inconsiderable minority of users, would have resulted in network splits, because they were hard forks and they were contentious and they were not changes that were being put through the open source change review process of the reference implementation, right? They were alternative implementations that were making changes outside of that process. So, you can look at this whole situation and try to implicate Bitcoin Core somehow. It's kind of tough to do, right? There are a lot of Bitcoin Core contributors over the years. There are many people that have received funding from DCI, many of which didn't contribute to Bitcoin Core, some of which did contribute to Bitcoin Core. Like one of these people that Grok pulled up for me was AJ Towns, and I'll have to try to find this. I had an interesting exchange with him because he has received funding from DCI. At least he didn't deny that. That's what Grok told me. But Grok listed him as a contributor to Bitcoin Knots, as a well-known contributor to Bitcoin Knots. And he said that that's okay because he's got both Grok and Luke speaking for him. And what he means is that he was credited as a direct contributor to the release of Bitcoin Knots on their release page. He doesn't appreciate this characterization because what essentially happened here was he had pull requests that were either open or merged in Bitcoin Core, and those pull requests were taken and merged into Bitcoin Knots, which is essentially, any code that's published to the Bitcoin Core repository is free and open source by its licensing. So anybody is free to take that code and use it. But calling him a direct contributor to the release of Knots is actually lying. That's like developing a Linux app and saying that Linus Torvald directly contributed, right? You're just taking things out of context. It's like putting Satoshi's name on your binary release. as a direct contributor just because he wrote some code that you used.